Gunfire, screams, a broadcast cuts out, a helicopter lifts off into the freezing Romanian sky. Then, silence. Romania, December 1989. The last dictator in Europe is on the run. This is the story of a nation's desperate struggle for freedom, a pivotal moment that reshaped the geopolitical landscape of Eastern Europe. The year is 1989. Across Eastern Europe, the Iron Curtain, a symbolic and physical barrier dividing the continent, is crumbling. From the Solidarity movement in Poland to the fall of the Berlin Wall, a wave of peaceful revolutions is sweeping away decades of Soviet-backed communist rule. Yet in Romania, a chilling silence persists, a stark contrast to the jubilant scenes elsewhere. This is the story of Nicolae Ceaușescu, a man whose reign would end not with a whimper, but a violent, cathartic roar. For over 2 decades, he had forged a unique, brutal brand of communism, isolating his nation even from its Warsaw Pact allies. A nation, long suffocated by fear and deprivation, was about to reclaim its breath in a torrent of blood and defiance, marking the most violent end to communism in the Eastern Bloc. Mid-December 1989. The air is sharp, the tension sharper. For 24 years, Romania has been the personal fiefdom of Nicolae Ceaușescu, the self-proclaimed genius of the Carpathians and conducator leader. His cult of personality, meticulously crafted and enforced, permeated every aspect of life, presenting him as an infallible visionary. This was a regime built on absolute control, economic austerity, and pervasive fear. Ceaușescu's rise from humble origins to absolute power was initially marked by a degree of independence from Moscow, earning him some international recognition. However, this soon devolved into a megalomaniacal obsession with grand, often disastrous, projects like the House of the People and the systematization of villages. His economic policies, aimed at paying off foreign debt through extreme austerity, plunged the population into profound poverty. Food was rationed to starvation levels, heating was a luxury, and electricity was severely limited, especially during the harsh Romanian winters. The omnipresent Securitate, his notoriously brutal secret police, maintained an iron grip, monitoring citizens, suppressing dissent, and instilling a deep-seated paranoia. Every conversation, every gathering, was potentially under surveillance. This pervasive fear had, for decades, stifled any organized opposition, making Romania an outlier in the 1989 wave of change. In the western city of Timișoara, a multi-ethnic city with a significant Hungarian minority, the first crack in this seemingly impenetrable facade appeared. László Tokes, a Hungarian Reformed pastor, had become an outspoken critic of the regime's ethnic policies and its suppression of religious freedom. His defiant sermons, broadcast internationally, drew the ire of the authorities. When the state attempted to evict him from his parish on December 15, his parishioners and local residents gathered to protect him. What began as a local protest quickly escalated. On December 16, thousands joined the demonstration, chanting anti-government slogans. The Securitate and military forces were deployed, initially attempting to disperse the crowds with water cannons and tear gas. But the defiance grew. On December 17, Ceaușescu, viewing the protests as a direct challenge to his authority, issued a direct order to open fire on the unarmed civilians. The bloodshed was horrific. Dozens were killed, hundreds wounded. The regime attempted to cover up the massacre, even moving bodies to Bucharest for cremation to erase evidence. But the truth, like blood, spreads. Despite the state's efforts to control information, news of the Timișoara massacre began to filter out, igniting a spark of outrage across the nation. The initial act of defiance in Timișoara, met with such brutal repression, inadvertently became the catalyst for a nationwide uprising. December 21st Street, Palace Square, Bucharest. The atmosphere is frigid, both literally and figuratively. Tens of thousands stand in the cold, summoned by decree, not loyalty, for a mass rally intended to condemn the hooliganism in Timișoara and reaffirm Ceaușescu's popular support. This was a classic tactic of totalitarian regimes, stage a show of unity to project an image of unshakable power. Ceaușescu appears on the balcony of the Communist Party headquarters, his face painted with a hollow smile, flanked by his wife, Elena, and other party officials. He begins his speech, a monotonous litany of platitudes, propaganda, and self-congratulatory rhetoric, praising the socialist achievements and condemning foreign interference. The crowd, largely composed of workers bussed in from factories, is silent, their cheers fake, piped in through speakers to create an illusion of enthusiasm. But then, it happens. A ripple of dissent, initially faint, begins to spread through the vast crowd. Shouts erupt from various sections. Timișoara, down with the dictator. We are the people. The carefully orchestrated facade begins to crack. Live on national television, Ceaușescu's face falls, his smile vanishing, replaced by confusion and then anger. His voice falters, his carefully rehearsed speech dissolving into stammering. Elena, beside him, screams at the crowd, urging them to be quiet. Security scrambles, attempting to identify and silence the dissenters. The camera, following a pre-arranged cue for any disruption, tilts skyward, a desperate attempt to cut the live broadcast and hide the unprecedented rebellion from the nation. But it is too late. The illusion shatters. Millions of Romanians, watching from their homes, witnessed their supreme leader falter, exposed and vulnerable. The people are no longer afraid. The collective fear that had paralyzed the nation for decades has finally broken. The rally, intended to solidify his power, became the very moment of its unraveling. That night, as the echoes of the shattered rally reverberated across Bucharest, Ceaușescu, in a desperate attempt to reassert control, ordered a brutal crackdown. Tanks rolled into the streets, snipers took positions on rooftops, and the Securitate unleashed terror. Protesters, emboldened by the day's events, clashed with security forces. The sounds of gunfire and explosions filled the capital. The pavement became stained with the blood of those who dared to defy the regime. Hospitals overflowed with the wounded. Yet, by morning, something extraordinary happened, something that defied the expectations of a totalitarian state. The military, long seen as an instrument of the regime, began to waver. Soldiers, many of them conscripts from ordinary Romanian families, refused to fire on their own people. In a stunning turn of events, some soldiers, witnessing the brutality and feeling the tide of public opinion, began to join the crowds, turning their weapons against the Securitate. This defection of the army was a critical turning point, signaling the collapse of Ceaușescu's authority. News of the army's shift spread like wildfire. Workers from across Romania, hearing of the uprising in the capital and the events in Timișoara, began to march toward Bucharest. The revolution was no longer a localized protest, it was a nationwide movement, a spontaneous eruption of long-suppressed rage and a collective yearning for freedom. The streets of Bucharest transformed into a battleground, with revolutionaries, now often supported by elements of the army, fighting pitched battles against the loyalist Securitate forces. The revolution had truly begun. December 22nd. The momentum of the revolution was unstoppable. Thousands of protesters, now joined by defecting soldiers, breached the defenses of the Communist Party headquarters, the very building from which Ceaușescu had delivered his ill-fated speech. The building, a symbol of his power, was now under siege. Inside, panic ensued. Ceaușescu and Elena, realizing their reign was over, made a desperate dash for escape. They fled to the rooftop, where a military helicopter, piloted by Lieutenant Colonel Vasile Milutin, was waiting. They escaped by mere seconds, lifting off just as the first revolutionaries stormed the building. Their initial destination was Snagov, a presidential retreat north of Bucharest, where they hoped to regroup and perhaps rally loyalist forces. However, the situation on the ground was deteriorating rapidly for the regime. Air traffic control, now under the control of the revolutionary forces, intervened. All unauthorized flights were grounded. The pilot, under immense pressure and fearing for his own life, informed the Ceaușescu that he could not continue. Their helicopter was forced to land near Târgu Vista, a city northwest of Bucharest. Stranded, they attempted to flee by car, hijacking a passing Dacia. The mechanic driving him, unaware of their identity at first, listened in disbelief as radio reports confirmed the uprising's success and the fall of Ceaușescu's regime. The most powerful man in Romania, who had once commanded absolute obedience, was now a fugitive, utterly dependent on the kindness of strangers. Eventually, they were recognized and apprehended by local police and military units loyal to the revolution. They were taken to a military barracks in Târgu Vista and locked in a storage room. The genius of the Carpathians, the man who had ruled Romania with an iron fist for nearly a quarter century, was now a prisoner, his absolute power evaporated in a matter of hours. The swiftness of their capture underscored the complete collapse of their authority and the widespread rejection of their rule. December 24th, Christmas Eve. In a small, hastily arranged room within the Târgu Vista military barracks, an extraordinary military tribunal was convened. The atmosphere was tense, charged with the raw emotions of a nation that had just overthrown its oppressor. The charges against Nicolae and Elena Ceaușescu were grave: genocide, economic sabotage, abuse of power, and theft of national wealth. These accusations reflected the deep suffering and widespread corruption that had characterized their rule. The trial itself was highly controversial, a rapid, summary proceeding that lasted barely an hour. It lacked many of the hallmarks of due process, raising questions about its legitimacy and whether it was more an act of revolutionary justice than a fair legal process. Ceaușescu, defiant to the end, laughed at the accusations, dismissing the court as illegitimate and a coup d'état. Elena, equally unrepentant, mocked the proceedings, asserting their innocence and their right to rule. They refused to acknowledge the authority of their captors, clinging to the delusion of their power. Despite their protests and denials, the verdict was swift and predetermined, guilty on all counts. The sentence, death by firing squad. Immediately, the speed of the verdict and execution was driven by several factors: the fear of a Securitate counter-coup, the desire to prevent any loyalist forces from attempting to rescue them, and the overwhelming public demand for immediate justice. The revolutionary leaders believed that only the swift execution of the Ceaușescu could truly consolidate the revolution and prevent further bloodshed. They refused to be bound, maintaining a semblance of dignity even in their final moments. They were dragged into the barracks courtyard, a cold, desolate space. Elena screamed at the firing squad, cursing them. Nicolae, according to some accounts, began singing the Internationale, the anthem of the communist movement, a final, ironic gesture from a man who had betrayed its ideals. Other accounts dispute this, suggesting he was simply defiant. His song, or his defiance, was cut short by a volley of bullets. The execution was filmed, albeit crudely, and the footage was quickly broadcast across Romania and the world. By morning, images of the bloodied bodies aired across the country. For many Romanians, it was not horror, but a profound sense of catharsis, a release from decades of oppression. The dictator was dead. The people had won. The revolution, though bloody and chaotic, had achieved its ultimate goal, the complete overthrow of the Ceaușescu regime. The execution, while controversial, undeniably marked the definitive end of an era. It sent an unequivocal message that the old order was gone, and there would be no return. The immediate aftermath of the revolution was tumultuous. The National Salvation Front, largely composed of former communist dissidents and reformists, quickly assumed power, leading to a period of political instability and continued clashes with remaining Securitate elements. The transition to democracy was slow, fragile, and often fraught with challenges. The scars of dictatorship, economic hardship, a pervasive culture of fear, and a deeply ingrained lack of trust in institutions remained. However, the revolution had opened the door to a new future. In May 1990, Romania held its first free elections, a monumental step towards democratic governance. Over the subsequent decades, Romania embarked on a path of reform and integration into the Euro-Atlantic community. It joined NATO in 2004, a significant step towards security and stability, and the European Union in 2007, symbolizing its commitment to democratic values and economic integration. While the legacy of Ceaușescu's rule and the revolution itself continue to be debated by historians and political analysts, the spirit of defiance that emerged in December 1989 remains a powerful testament to the Romanian people's resilience. The path to a fully consolidated democracy has been long and complex, but the hope that ignited in those bloody days survives, a constant reminder of the price of freedom. He silenced a nation for 24 years, building a regime on fear, deprivation, and an elaborate cult of personality. In just 4 days of unprecedented courage and sacrifice, they found their voice, and ended his rule with it. This was the fall of Nicolae Ceaușescu, a brutal dictator brought down by the very people he sought to control. It stands as a stark reminder of the fragility of tyranny and the enduring power of human will for freedom. This is History Unburied. If this story moved you, if it deepened your understanding of a pivotal moment in modern history, then subscribe for more cinematic documentaries that resurrect the moments that shaped our world. Share this video with fellow students, historians, and anyone interested in the complex tapestry of Eastern European history. And in the comments below, what other revolutions, what other untold stories, deserve to be unearthed and remembered? Your engagement helps us continue to bring these vital narratives to light.